Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Personal Branding 101. And today we've got another Personal Branding Secrets episode. So, in these episodes, I get to sit down with successful entrepreneurs, personal brand people who they're going to tell us their secrets, some of their highs, some of their lows, and give us a couple of tips so that you can action it yourself. So, today's guest, we have Ian Moyse. So, Ian is a technology sales leader. He has actually sat on boards of a number of boards for industry bodies such as FAST, which is the Federation Against Software Theft, CIF, I think, which is Cloud Industry Forum, and Eurocloud. He was actually awarded the accolade of the BESMA UK Sales Director of the Year for 2019 and 2020 and was listed in the top 50 sales keynote speakers by Top Sales World. So Ian was actually rated the number one in cloud influencer on Analytica. There's some big old words here, Ian. I love this. Analytica, and has been recognized as a leading cloud blogger, and is listed in the EMEA top 50 influencers in data centers, cloud and data 2017, and top 50 cloud computing blogs 2020. So that is a hell of a lot of stuff. So I'm very excited to get Ian on here to talk about his journey and share some of his secrets. But first, let's run the intro. Hello, Ian. Welcome to the show.
Ash, thank you, and for the kind intro. I will make one correction because the comma was in the wrong place. I was on Analytica's number one influencer for twice and won BESMA once. So
comma's in the wrong place. Well, what a shame. Only you know.
I took the promotion when you said it. I'm good. How are you this morning?
I'm very, very good. Very good, mate. It's really exciting. I'm really excited to speak to you because I've seen all your stuff. A lot, and then you sent me a message to come on the show, and I rudely ignored it, and I didn't realize I had, and I kept seeing this and you're on my list of guests. This is everyone's going to hear now because I'm very open about this, and I'm very much like admit when I've done the wrong thing. Because I was like, I wonder if he'd come on the show, and then I looked on my Instagram, and you'd sent me a message like
it
months
happens,
ago.
right? We're all busy.
Like,
it happens.
He's going to think I'm a dick. So
don't worry. I mean, we're all busy, and things slip through the net, you know. And in today's world, with what we've all faced, it's understandable.
But it's absolutely amazing to have you on here, and I'm really, really glad. And I think your that intro is a very impressive intro. And what I'd like to do before I, ramble on, because I love the sound of my own voice, as you will understand as we go through this. I try to keep quiet, but could you give us a bit of a backstory? So you're I refer to it as a superhero origin story. So in other words, how did you end up getting to that point? How did you, I'm obviously going to talk about it in more depth, but give us a bit of an overview. What do you do? Who are you? And how did your journey start?
Sure. So I'll do it in reasonable summary form. So yeah, I've been in sales an awful long time. Originally started as a programmer, funny enough, and then saw the light when I was young of actually company car, mobile phone, sales. I know what I'm talking about with the techie stuff, so maybe I could do something there. The mobile phone at that time was virtually the size of the car, but which hates me. But and yeah, so always been worked through sales leadership, doing stuff. And what I know and how I ended up where I am today, and some of that stuff you kindly described, is I watched as the world for selling and buying changed. The internet came along, Web 2 came along with social media. The buyer dynamic in all of us changed. And when I speak at events, when we get back to the norm of doing this, I often ask people in the audience, how many of you have been influenced by a review on Amazon, for example? How many of you look at the star rating on an app on your phone? And an app's a 59p, but you'll have a quick glance at the star, it's 1 star from 400 people. I'm not. You're influenced by people who don't even know. That never used to happen. I remember the day you'd go to a meeting, they'd say, "Tell me about you. Tell me about your company," because there was very little outside source they had of information. Today, people can know virtually everything about you as an individual, let alone your business, the market, at the click, of a few keys. So I watched the world change, and through that, I consistently looked at, what do I need to change? What do I need to adjust to stay relevant and to keep my sales teams relevant? in a world that is invariably changing every day, every month, every year as people buy differently. And through that, ended up using LinkedIn originally, then looking at other social platforms and starting to do what we now moniker as social selling without knowing what it was, and learning it the hard way. There was no books, there was no methodology out there. It's pretty much trial and error. Try something, figure out what works, figure out what doesn't. And off the back of that, that led to the personal brand side, because I realized, well, if you're using social media to try and engage with people, they're going to take a look back at you and you're more visible. And social media and the platforms, of course, have expanded over the past 10 years. That if you don't make yourself look good and have that personal brand, your whole social selling piece is going to fall flat. So it all sort of came together, but it's been learned organically on the street, knocking on the doors, sort of thing, socially, and figuring out what worked and what didn't. So this isn't from, I often get people approaching me trying to sell me this stuff who haven't actually done it. They're just trying to flog you some training. Yeah. I've learned it the hard way. So I know what doesn't work. I know what does work. I don't know it all. I'm still learning. I'm watching your content, Ash, that comes out. There's still stuff to learn every day about this, because it is a methodology. It's not a platform to do this. And there's lots of little nuances in there that I've learned along the way, and things that maybe we'll talk about now.
Definitely. No, I love that. I want to dive a bit deep into that, because I actually really like how you said, because I'm a big believer of this, is that there's a lot of people who are trying to sell a method who've never actually done it. And I actually say this to my clients, and it's interesting you say that when we're going to talk about the highs and the lows, but everything I have done, anything I teach and I've spoken about, and that's what you said then, is I did it. And it either, if I'm telling you it didn't work, it's because it didn't work.
Yeah.
You get a lot of egg on your face that you have to try and error a lot. And I think there's a lot of people who have watched a couple of YouTube videos and then go, oh, it's simple. You just do this, this, and this. And it's really not. It's really not.
Yeah, so, which is why people are getting it wrong, right? I mean, I get people trying to sell me social selling training, and the fact that I speak on it and have been involved in it for years and sat on the board of a social selling company. Well, you just told me you don't understand social selling by the fact you're trying to sell me it because you haven't done your research to understand I'm not your profile customer. Yeah. Fail number one.
It is so funny. And that's LinkedIn for you, isn't it? How many times do you get that, like a message? I get a message from coaches all the time, how I can, like, and I always love when they say, oh, do you need any more leads? Because we can generate, da, da, da. And I'm like, I don't need any leads. I've got a waiting list. Thank you very much. Bye. Yeah. Yeah. Like, you've never even tried to speak to me. So I want to take that a little bit back a bit, because I love that you from the tech background, from the programming side, you move over to sales, and we've all been there. That's how I ended. I love it. It's the company car is the thing that makes you go, and then you realize how much tax you're paying on it, and you're like, what was the point? But when you started to build your personal brand, when was that? How long ago? When did you actually start doing that? Because as you said, there was not many people doing it. And you've obviously got an incredible resume here of what you've done, and your following is huge. You've got how many? I think it's like over 30,000 on Instagram.
LinkedIn was the first one I started on, and I remember in about 2011, a marketing person saying to me, "Oh my God, you've got," it was 2,000 or 3,000, I can't remember the exact number, on LinkedIn connections, and so I hadn't even thought about it at that point. I hadn't even considered, is that a lot, or is it okay? Yeah. I've now got, I think, 36,000. I run a group on there that's got 42,000 members and growing consistently. But it's not about the numbers, it's about the engagement and the quality of those connections as well, right? And I'm proud that I've got a lot of connections on there who are very senior people, some who I knew when they were junior positions, and it's gone through it and their careers developed and they're now very useful senior contacts. And others who've reached out. I'm proud that I've got book authors of some of the top sales books on the planet who, through social engagement, eventually started following me of their own volition. And I'm connected to people off one of the dragons off Dragon's Den, some big influence in the market, one of the apprentice judges, etc. And I like to think I earned that through the brand that I've built and the equity I've built. I look credible enough that someone would want to connect to me when I get those invites and those connections. That's what says to me, okay, this works.
Yeah. So how long have you been? I mean, that's you're literally ticking all the boxes here for people to listen to like what the benefits of a personal brand. I think it's amazing. So how long have you been doing it for then? How long did it take you to really start seeing results? And the reason why I say that is a lot of people, especially now, I did a post yesterday, which did some research on this, which was quite interesting, is that it won't be yesterday when this comes out, but yesterday when we're speaking, and it was that the average attention span of a person now is 8 seconds, which is actually 1 second less than a goldfish.
Yeah,
And
I've seen
that has gone down by 30% since 2000.
Yeah,
And
I saw that stat finally recently. Yeah,
it's crazy.
yeah.
So how have you, and the reason why I say this is like to build a brand is very hard because people are not wanting to stick around, they're not wanting to do it. So how long did it take for you to build traction? How consistent were you? What did you do at the beginning, right at the very beginning? Because we could look at you now and go, you've got all these connections, and I think, but it's very hard to understand what was it like at the beginning. What was some of the struggles, some of the hard bits you had to put the time in? What was that like?
So I didn't go out after the connections. Really, it was about the engagement. Because remember, I came from this from a sales head point of view, and it was how do I use social media to open a conversation? Because social selling is in simplest form is about using the social platforms to open up a conversation that turns into a real world conversation, be it now on video, as we're all used to, phone or in person. At that point, your normal selling skills and engagement takes over and you're past the process. But it's the first part where lead gen is difficult, getting that first conversation, because everyone is trying to get the conversation. That's where the methodology of social selling are applied. Yeah. Right now, when you make contact with a customer, you don't start tweeting the messages and doing stuff. You'll now have a more robust, direct conversation, and you'll have phone conversation and conversations like this. So you've earned the right. But that's what drove me to it was that need as part of my daily role to be able to engage new prospective clients. So I didn't consciously start to do personal branding. And when you were asking that question, I was thinking, well, subconsciously, it's been all the time I've been on social media, but without knowing it, right? Because anything you put out there, anything that someone can see of you is your personal brand, which we may come on to about.
Yeah, we will. It's good.
But
keep going. It's absolutely
consciously, it was about bombs. Yeah, consciously, it was about the last 2 or 3, 4 years when I started to, I do blogs for companies I work for as part of, again, the sales piece. I want to be successful. What contributes to that? We want to get people interested in content. So I was doing all that stuff, and then it fell upon me that actually this is drawing people to me, and I was honing my personal brand without knowing it. I was looking at what other people did on the different social platforms. How did they make their profile look? How did they make it stand out? What attracted me when I looked at someone's profile? What made me go, oh, I like that. So I was borrowing, plagiarization is not a bad thing. And I'm always looking at little things people have done. And often I spot something small and think, oh, how did I miss that? Let's go and do that. LinkedIn just added a new function where you can add how your name is pronounced.
Yeah.
Well, oh, Craig, I'll fill that in. It's completeness of how you look and controlling your brand. But the key thing behind that, the key thing I've got to say is it's got to be authentic. So you rattled off the awards and stuff. Great. I can use those because I've genuinely won those for different reasons. That helps with what I do. And everyone has that opportunity in their sector. Think about what you can use to enhance your brand, but it's got to be genuine and authentic. That's the key. Too many people, I think, want to get into this and build a brand overnight. I want to be a social influencer and I want to do it tomorrow. So the biggest thing is it takes time. It does take time and investment and effort, but boy, does it pay off if you're willing to invest in yourself.
I love how you say, so that's very true. So the accolades and stuff you've got there. So part of my method that I created, we look at what we call a personal brand ecosystem. So your personal brand ecosystem is built up of 5 areas. And that is, and which is exactly what you're saying here, which is why I want to dive into it in a contextual, relevant way, is those 5 areas are your physical identity, the way you look, the way you sound, however, like physical presence, whether they meet you face to face, your digital identity, which is everything online, your story, which is the glue that glues them together. That isn't your life story. It's how you position yourself. And then you've got your network, which is what you're building and we're doing here. But then you have your social proof. Now, when you have all 5 of those things in line, which is what you've done, which I love, you will build that narrative over time. You control it. And that's what you're saying there, which I think I just want to highlight for my listeners here is what Ian's done there is, which is, well, like you say, whether you've consciously or subconsciously done it throughout your time, is you've constantly refined that ecosystem so that you're looking at it going, okay, what has someone else done? When I look at that person, they look like an authority. What have they done that made me go, oh my gosh? And there are so many subtle things that people don't realize. And I love what you said about plagiarism, because that is something that is, I talk about, you're the first person on the podcast to say that. And I think you will be guessed. I think we're in the 70s when this one comes out episode wise. And you're the first person to say about plagiarism. And I think that's a really good, valid point, because there is no such thing as originality anymore. Like, I don't believe that that's a thing. I think too many people, and I used to see this, and it might be the same in your sales background. I used to see this in my performing arts world where everyone was looking for the perfect audition song. It had to be the song that no one had ever sung, that everybody, that song was going to win me the job. And they were looking for this song. Now, the truth is, and that's the same with this, everyone's trying to look for the thing that's going to make them different. But the truth is, it's not about the originality, it's about the individuality. It's about how you take a song that people have done lots and lots of times over and over again, and how do you put your stamp on it. Yeah. And I think that's where people, and that's wonderful you said that, is too many people are like, oh, well, they might look at your content and my content and go, oh, well, Ian's already done that, so I can't do that. Well, I get people, people might, oh, Ashes. When I first started it, I did, my first ever content was a dictionary. It was a home buyer dictionary. It was literally, what is the terms used when buying a house? The amount of messages I'd have from people saying, do you mind if I borrow that? I was like, I didn't invent it. Take it. And I think that's really, really good point to raise, because otherwise you're just analysis paralysis. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm always borrowing from people, I always profess that I'm not baked yet, and same in sales, right? I'm still learning, don't know it all, because things change. You may have been good at a point in time, but to stay continually good, you've got to adjust and change, and we've all gone through that this year. Yeah. Like, we've all had a change that no one foresaw, and we've had to pivot, and businesses have had to pivot of, how do I stay relevant now? It's changed, so get on with it. And that's what you need to do in this sort of thing.
How have you found that with this change, with what you do is social selling and understanding, and you're very much like, an expert in that space now and understanding it. What's your thoughts on it with COVID? And because I found it quite interesting that all of a sudden the old methods that were never dying, but they were going, and people held on to them. And then I'd like to hear your kind of 2 cents on this, but people seem to hold on to these methods. I found this all the time where it'd be like, well, I don't need social because my clients see me face to face. I don't need to build. You mentioned about your group. I don't need to build a community because I buy my leads or whatever. What I've noticed myself with COVID is the businesses that invested before and built a community before have either survived or thrived, but they've weathered it. And then there was a mad scramble, and I'd love to hear your take on this. There was a mad scramble for every business who'd neglected it to go, oh, how do we rapidly build a community? Have you noticed that yourself with this? What's your kind of take on that with COVID and social selling?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've spoken a number of times during the COVID period on different events, panels, etc., such as this. And one of the things I've said is the digital first impression, and that's whether it be for your organization and for you as an individual, is now more important than ever. This is the validation point, right? And social selling the same, because before people were seeing it as, well, it's something else we could do, but now it's become essential because everyone is sat in front of a PC most of the time, right? And what I've said to people is, in the old real world, what would happen is you might go to visit a prospective customer, and they intended to check you out as an individual, but they were in another meeting in the building. They rushed down to see you. They got distracted in the corridor. They grab you in a meeting room. Off you go. Today, 5 minutes before they're talking to you, they're probably sat in front of their PC making sure the connection works on Zoom or Hangouts or whatever it is. And it's very easy for them now because they're sat there. The keyboard is within reach to check you out.
Yeah.
Right. And they can check you out. And I've said this to people, Ash, while I'm talking to you, if you don't know which screen I've got you on and which camera and where, I could be typing here, talking to the camera and pulling up your profile and looking at things while I'm talking to you.
I do. Right.
And so as an individual human being, you need to assume today people will check you out more than ever before, number one. Number two, for those who are in furlough or unfortunately are looking for jobs, do not underestimate the power of your personal brand. Your CV's here, but your CV hits that company or the individuals. Do you really believe no one there is going to look you up? Right? No one in that process is going to bother just to put your name into Google and see what they find in an ever competitive world, right? And I've spoken to some people recently saying, oh my God, the number of job applicants they're getting because the volume.
Yeah.
Well, people are going to start to narrow you down and look at, well, how do you look online? Because you're going to represent us and our customers are more online than ever before. So I think there's been a lot of naivety about this, both in businesses and individuals. And in businesses, I think a lot of it's been because that's marketing's job.
Yeah.
Well, the world's changed, right? It isn't all marketing controlled anymore and centrally controlled. And your personal brand goes with you wherever you go. It is yours. That is the thing you've got to remember. And that's why you've got to care about it. It is yours throughout your career. It is not something you leave behind in the company when you change companies.
I think that's brilliant. I've worked with a few. This seems to be very obvious in the sporting world. So a couple of my clients, I've worked with some ex-professional footballers and ex-professional rugby players. And I think this is the same for like C-level or director level employees. It's exactly the same thing. When they're playing at a very high level, whether that's in business or in sport, they seem to neglect or overestimate the power of the brand of the business they work for or the team they play for, and don't realize the leverage that they actually have by being associated with that team. They should be building something that's not an exit strategy, so to speak, but not many we're not talking like Premiership, but if they're Championship, or I'm not really a big football guy, so I don't really understand how it works, but like there's different levels obviously, and it's the same with that. If you're a director of a company, you need to be nurturing that brand so that you are seen as what do you bring to that company, not Ash works for Joe Bloggs Corporate. I don't want to say any companies. Joe Bloggs Incorporated. And that's his identity, because what happens, and you've probably seen in lots of places, is when they leave, they're a nobody again. They're an absolute nobody. And it's like, great, your CV says this. I had Philip Van Dusen on the podcast, and he worked for PepsiCo. He was a VP of branding for PepsiCo. And he said that, like, he's now brilliant, got 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. He's absolutely killing it as his own personal brand business. But he said when he left, he was like, I didn't build anything. Like, I had this power on my card that said, look who I work for and look at my title. But once the title is gone and he left, he said, like, truthfully, me and him would have been the same. Because visibility, and I say this a lot, visibility is more important in today's world than ability, because people assume you're good. That's a given. You should be good. But if I don't know, and exactly like you say, if I Googled you, this is why, like with you, and I love that you just said that, is very true, is every podcast guest I have come on here, obviously I see who they are, I know who they are, but before I come into the studio, 15 minutes before they come on, and I look at your LinkedIn, I look at your Instagram, I look at what you've done, I look at everything. And there have been guests, joking aside, where I brought them on and I go, oh, that wasn't as impressive as I'd assumed it was going to be. When I'm looking at them, and then I had to pull it out. Well, there's other guests where I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to chat about this. They look amazing. So it affects the way I'm coming into the conversation. So that's really powerful that you've said.
And it's a really good point you make there, Ash, in the way you formulate that, is that, when you think about it, that's really good point. When you leave a job, people tend to lose their persona, right? Because it was the title, it was there. It's not me. You're still you.
Yeah.
But it affects people psychologically. But if you've got that strong brand you worked on, you've still, that carries with you. It's no, I'm still known by these companies, or I'm known for my content that's out there. And that content, if you look back over me on the Google pages, I was posting content and blogs under all the companies I've worked for the last, let's say, 10 years. I can't remember when I really started thinking, oh, actually, because I understood what I was talking about, had a voice, had an opinion, and found that my style of blogging was conversational, that people sort of liked it because it wasn't formulaic corporate marketing. So the companies I've worked for have used my content. Sometimes it's been video, sometimes written content, but it's content around subjects as thought leadership. That content's still out there.
Yeah.
It represents me, even though they posted it. I linked to it from my profiles, and I have copies of it, and I post it. It's still stuff that I did, and my credibility and my brand, even though it came out from their company piece. It's me speaking, and my name's on it. So it isn't always you have to go and form your own blog and create your own podcast and stuff. Like here, right? You've given me the privilege of coming on your podcast. The opportunity's there. If you've got genuinely authentic knowledge to impart and thought leadership to impart and value to others, you can do it, and you can get doing it. And I've said during COVID, it's a perfect time for people to do this, right? You've got some time on your hand, particularly if you've been furloughed or otherwise. You are still you. You still have the same value, intrinsic value as a human being. So make use of it.
I love that. And you're so right as well. You don't need to be, I think people think that you have to have your own show. You have to create a YouTube channel. You have to do, you really don't. As you said, then you can go on other people's podcasts. There's tons of websites. I was saying to you beforehand, like matchmaker.fm. There's tons of them though, where you can go on and go, look, I'm an expert in this. This is what I've done. I'd love to come on your podcast.
Yeah.
You can, like you say, you can even, but on LinkedIn, I love because you can literally just be in the conversation. Just jump onto other people's stuff and say, I really like that because of da 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 da. Share it. You don't have to. And I think personal brand, in my opinion, has been taken so that people think it's an entrepreneur. I hate the word entrepreneurial, by the way. That's a different story altogether.
I've got my opinion as well. They're probably the same, but let's partake that one for the moment.
I think that's a bit. We'll be here forever if we talk about the word entrepreneur. It is interesting because it's not just for that. It's not just reserved for that. I said to someone before, like I'm self-employed because I'm unemployable. I'm the worst person to have employed because I just don't do as I'm told. And I always think I've got a better idea than everyone else, so I have to be self-employed. But it's not reserved, and that's a bad thing. I wish I could be employed, but it's not reserved for just someone like me. It's more important than ever for people who are employed, I think, especially right now. Like, why are they different? I mean, that's a really, really powerful thing. So I wanted to ask you, with you and your brand, what have been some of the difficulties that you've faced? And the reason why I say this is, I'm a big advocate of this. Just my listeners will know this context, but just to give you some context on this. So when I started my personal brand about 3 years ago, when I started to really invest in it, and about a year ago, everything from the outside looked amazing, but everything on the inside was absolutely terrible. There was lots of stuff wasn't happening. It just wasn't what I thought. And I hadn't realized that everything on the outside looked great. This is where you see this narrative. And I was chatting with somebody and I said, well, this isn't working. And they said, well, you're absolutely killing it and it looks great. And da, da, da. And I thought it was the first time for me where it hit a real reality of this Instagram versus reality thing where people only see what you've put out. And it made me, it kind of, to be honest, is one of the reason why I started interviewing guests. It was like, we need to share people who are doing really well. We need to share that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, because I think it gives people hope that if they're feeling low and they're feeling bad, it's exact, we've been there.
Yeah.
Obviously be as candid as you want. You don't have to say what you don't want to say, but what have been some of the things that you in this, 10 years you've been doing this now, you said that like 10 years of, or I'm guessing, because that's what you said, you've been right for 10 years. What have been some of the moments where you've been like, oh my God, this is hard? Like, what have been some of those struggles?
So yeah, I'll give you a few actually that come from different angles. So firstly, creating content isn't always easy, right? I often get a spark of an idea, And the idea is easy. Writing down the title of a blog, oh, that'd be a great idea, and there's an angle there, and I could think about. But then when you sit down to write it in front of a blank piece of paper, it suddenly gets a bit more challenging, right? Because you right, okay, well, how do you turn that into something meaningful that gives some insight or some value that isn't just two sentences? So I've got loads of blog ideas that haven't been formulated yet because the hard part is that the creation of the content, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And I've been playing with video lately because it's easier just to talk, but then you've got to figure out some of the tech and how do you change the background. So I've been playing around with some of that to try and get some cleverer content out that makes it easier for me, because I find it easier just to talk, as you probably gather from this. The biggest hard one, though, I think, is an emotional one. Is the minute, and I don't know if you face this, but when you start to if you ever use the word of, I'm doing this on personal brand, you do get people who don't understand it, the naysayers, who you will, to a degree, it's an attack of, where do you think you are? Who do you think you are? It's like, it's not about being, and I talk about this often, it's not about being a celebrity. If you want to create a personal brand, you're a celebrity, it's overnight. But if you want to create it as a nobody, I don't know if a celebrity, it's self-created, you need to earn it. So when people do the naysaying thing, it sometimes feels negative and offensive, and that really, maybe I should go back into my shell of who am I to say this? But hang on a second, I've earned this. And it's not about being arrogant and saying, look, hey, look who I am. It's about saying, I want to represent myself as professionally as I possibly can for what I do in the sector that I work, to the people that I respect. And that is called a personal brand. I didn't name it personal brand, right? You could say, if I describe it that way, you'd say, oh, that's all right. But the fact you put personal brand on it, it becomes this, who do you think you are? So that's the hardest one, I think, because you will get people poking at it, and maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's ignorance of not understanding what it is, because it's not rocket science. It's just fundamentally hard work. Of, if you write blogs, you guest on things. I've been on the panel of many events, done keynote speeches. I have grafted to learn my trade, like you, to be able to stand up and speak. Well, if you think personal brand, well, stand up and speak in front of 250 people then credibly, and have people come up afterwards saying, I really enjoyed that, and those 5 things are fantastic, and can I ask you some questions. That gives me pride that I gave the audience value. Well, that's my brand. As you said, it's not just about online, but the people see it online. So that's the hardest one, I think, is the naysayers who will try and knock you for how dare you try and be this. But I'm not trying to be a celebrity. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to represent myself and my craft and my professionalism as well as I can at all times. And why is that a bad thing?
I think that's a really good point, actually. I get it all the time. I know exactly. It's interesting because when you very first start, I know with me, I read a book on this, and it said, I can't remember the name of the book now, but he was saying, like, at the beginning, I can't remember, I should do my head. It was like a couple of years ago, and he said, when you start on this journey of like it's personal development, really. You're trying to develop yourself to be a better person, whether that's professionally, whatever. There you're going to get the naysayers, and he said, and you'll be shocked who they are, because they actually end up being the people closest to you, which I found for me when they first started this. It was a lot of the people who were like, I remember sitting in my I worked for a finance company, and I've never actually said this on the podcast. I remember coming in and was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make these videos. I've seen it working. I know it's working in the other sectors. So like what you said at the beginning, looking at what's working. I was like, it's working in the fitness industry. It's working in the fashion industry, and the finance industry is old, and I could be one of the first people to do this. I came to my employer, and I worked with I wasn't employed, but it was like a firm when you're there. And I worked with a bunch of, there was like 10 advisors. And I must have brought the average age down to the advisors by a long, like they were like old school mortgage advisors and IFAs. And they just laughed at me. Like they literally like, who do you think you are? You don't know any. And I was like, and actually, joking aside, even my dad did it. We joke about it now, but I came back and I was like, what am I going to do? I was like, what am I going to do? I said, I had this great idea. I've had a really good response, like as in like when I've put it out there to the general public. But my dad worked in finance as well, and my boss and they all said, well, who are you to say that? You've only done it for 2 years or whatever. And then my dad, he's worked in finance for 40 years. When, well, I agree with them. Who are you to say that? And that's what, and I've stopped it for 6 months. And I think what people don't get is, and it was only when, you know, not like, excuse the language, I just thought, fuck you. I was literally like, done. Like, I'm sorry, like I'm going to do it. But then all that happens, and this is something I like what you said there, is you are going to always get that. And you probably get it. I get a lot of direct messages from people who, I also love this thing where, you know, if you put a post out and they disagree with the post and they take real offense to it. And the joke of it is that they take offense. This is where you talk about behavioral psychology and stuff, is they take offense to it, but they take offense to something that's not even in the post. Like, it's like, they've read it through their own lens. Like, I'm like, I always joke before, like, people say it's like going to somebody. It's like me coming to you, Ian, and going, Ian, do you like my hairstyle? Do you know what I mean? It's like me coming to you, do you like my hairstyle, Ian? What do you think? And then you go, I don't like the color. I go, okay, Ian, I didn't ask if you like my style, but the color.
Yeah.
All right, but you have to do this, don't you? Okay, I respect your opinion.
It's keyboard warriors, right? And I learned that on social media a long time ago. You'll get, no matter what you do, at some point you'll get someone flame something in. And what I learned very quickly, and I've warned other people to do, is just delete the comment. Just move on. Don't respond. You know, if it's rude or attacking, no need to respond. If it's something which is opinion based and you can add that, and you can usually tell the tonality of it, right? But that the attackers, the true keyboard warriors, stay away from them, because they're looking to get, they're baiting you to get into that conversation. And they do it to celebrities, they do it to lots, right? And that's why
they'll drag you over the coals. Like, once you start it, that's the problem with that. If you, I remember having my first troll on that, and the way you said it's very good. I had my first troll on a live, and I had the video back, and it literally is like being punched in the gut. Like, it proper wins you, doesn't it? Because you're like, this troll came in, and I was like, oh, and you can see my face. I've lost my momentum. And in my head, and that's what you're saying there, you've got to think of it like that. Is in my head, I was thinking, I think there wasn't many people watching, about 50 or odd people watching, and I was like, okay, these 50 people have seen that comment, and they are waiting for me to do something. So I have to, if I'm the personal brand guy, you have to lead by example and show them exactly how you should deal with it. Even though my pride and my feelings are hurting, and I was like, oh my God. And I was like, anyway, so we'll move on. And I went back and spoke to my wife, and then I was around my dad. I was like, what the hell is... But you have to lead by example, because you're so right. If you bait into that, all that happens is you lose, because you show a side of yourself that you didn't want to associate with your brand. You start arguing with people, and it just gets very messy.
Well, let me plagiarize. You can't please all the people all the time.
100%. No point in trying. No point even trying. So, one thing, I'm looking at this, we had a great chat. I want to ask one more question before we run this one to an end. It might be getting you on in another couple of months' time, because I think you've got more to give there. I think it'd be brilliant to bring you on in a couple of months, definitely.
Thank you.
But what 3 pieces of advice would you give to somebody if they were starting their personal brand now? This is like always the last question I always give. 3 tangible pieces of advice that someone who's right at square one. What would you say?
So the temptation, of course, is to go, we'll use this tool or do this, whatever. I'm going to give real generic stuff.
Download my course.
So number 1, perseverance. Do not expect, unless you're already a celebrity, etc., to just listen to something like this or some of your great content and then go and do a few things and then have 1 million followers all engaging with your content and be a blog writer and a podcaster and all this stuff by tomorrow. Break it down into small pieces and persevere, because I'm still doing it, right? And I've learned, and we'll talk maybe on another session about, well, how do you make it more efficient to do it? Because as you start doing it, you go, well, how do I have my content go out all the time then? Because I can't sit here doing it. And so I learned the hard way how to do that, right? So number 1, persevere. 2, be authentic. do not, whether it's social selling or personal branding, be inauthentic, put stuff that isn't factual. I often see, interestingly, posts from people I know from previous roles, etc. And you look at what they've got and you think, you didn't do that. You didn't do that. You put it on a public forum, and there's probably 50 of us who know you didn't do that. There's bending the truth a little bit, and come on. So it's be authentic about who you are, right? It carries more weight to be authentic on a long-term basis than to spin lies, because they will come back and burn you, and particularly in the social influence world, it won't do any favors. Don't try and talk about stuff you don't know. Learn. And the final one is, people listening might think, well, how do I get I think you asked it, starting their personal brand.
Yeah.
Let me correct that, in my opinion. Okay. If they're online today, if you have a social media profile, if I can search Google and find stuff about you today, you already have a personal brand.
Yeah.
But if you didn't realize that, then you're not controlling it. You're not managing it to give the best impression, to be shiny, because you all have a personal brand. You just don't call it that. Yeah. And I do it when I'm recruiting people. I search and look for every profile I can find on them. And if I can see it, it's allowed, because you posted it onto a public internet. So I think, understand you've already got a personal brand. You just might not be looking after it.
I think that's spot on. And that's actually a good correction there, because that is actually exactly how I feel, because I talk about it when I work with people and in modules and in the courses and stuff, is that your brand is there. That when you start doing like a program, or you start working on it with a coach, or you start doing it yourself, all you're doing is taking back control of the narrative. That's it. Like you don't, as you said, then that ecosystem that I talked about halfway through, that is happening whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So I love that. So that is good correction. That you see, it's a very early Tuesday morning, and I've not had enough coffee. Ian, before I shoot off, and before we wrap this up, where can people, if they want to connect with you, they want to find you, they want to be part of your group or anything like that, where can they go? Where's the best place to go?
So here's the final, I guess, personal branding tip from me for this morning. So if you go to ianmoyse.co.uk, or ianmoyse.cloud,
okay,
that will take you directly to my LinkedIn and my Twitter profile. So I've branded, and I've got it on across all my social profiles. I have a personal domain, so that I can just rattle them off and not say, do you know what, go to LinkedIn and search my name. Well, I've just made it more difficult for you to find me. I've made it simple.
Love it. That's brilliant. That's exactly right as well. Like less friction, all under your name. Do you know what? Brilliant example. That's the fourth little tip there on there. We'll add that on as the fourth one. Ian, thanks so much for coming on, buddy. And we'll definitely get you on again. I'll send you. I'll put a reminder now, and we'll book it in the next week or two for a couple of months' time. Because I think you've got way more knowledge to give, and I'm sure there'll be some stuff you want to talk about there as well. So let's run the outro, and thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Bye.